Welcome to this interview with Ari, a discussion chatting about music business and all things social media, promoting, emailing, all the good stuff that we don't often think about as musicians.
Sure.
So maybe start off with like a quick intro to you in case like our viewers don't know who you are or what you do.
Sure. So I'm going to turn this down because I can get that going. Okay, cool. So I started my music career in Minneapolis. I went there for school. I actually went to be went to the University of Minnesota as a classical trumpet major and to be a high school band director someday. So I thought I wanted to do. That first year, though, I very quickly realized I didn't want to be practicing my etudes and trumpet scales and all that stuff, and that I was more connected to songwriting. And so I started kind of performing out at coffee shops around campus, and I realized like that's really what I was connecting with, what I needed to do. So after that first year, I transferred to a music industry school where I studied music business, songwriting. Now this was around 2005 where kind of the industry was drastically shifting, but what we were being taught in school was kind of how the old music industry was operating. And so we we learned basically that if you want to have a career in music, you have to get a record deal. And so when I left school, that's what I thought. I'm like, oh, okay, they told me that I want to have a career in music. I have to get a record deal. So I'm like, all right, where's my record deal? I'm ready. Like, I'm ready to start my music career. And the record deal didn't come. So I'm like, all right, well, I have two options, I guess. I can sit around and wait for this record deal to happen, or I can just kind of figure out how to make a music career happen for myself. And so that's what I started doing. And I started performing around Minnesota and then touring. And basically it got to a point where I was bringing like 800 people to my shows in Minneapolis. I was selling out venues in like a 5-state region. I started touring the country. I was getting songs placed on TV shows, charting on iTunes, and all of this like without a label, without a manager, without a booking agent, just kind of figuring it all out on my own. And so eventually, like, I started to get a lot of questions from other musicians, like, how are you doing this? Like, how did you get your songs charted and all that stuff? And I would respond to everybody, but then word spread, like, if you have a question about music business, go ask Ari. And I just didn't have time to respond to everybody, so I kind of started this blog called Ari's Take, where I just put up everything I was learning and sharing all that information in real time to just kind of share the information and the knowledge. And as I learned more things and talked to more people, I would kind of write about it. And like, I got screwed at a club last night. I'm just like, oh yeah, don't do this. This is what I learned, and kind of worked that way. And then it just kind of grew from there.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're here today because it's the second edition of the book which you wrote, which sounds like it's kind of the best bits of your blog combined into one handy book. And I've skimmed it, and I know friends who personally have read it and applied it, and it's made a huge difference to their lives as artists. And I'm sure you have a lot of people coming up to you who it's made an impact on their lives. So I'm excited to have you here and ask you a few questions for the pickup audience.
Sure.
There's a lot of guitar players, musicians, as well as people who want to be artists. So dig into some of the details of the book, and also just I guess talking about what has happened since the first edition.
Sure.
So maybe start there. What has changed since you first released the book, and what are the kind of key things in the new book which you're excited to share with people?
Sure. So the first edition came out in December 2016, so 3 years ago. Yeah. And since then, a lot has evolved and shifted. And so basically, the entire social media chapter I completely rewrote. As you can imagine, that has changed quite drastically in the last 3 years. And I added about 50 pages of new information, everything from discussing Spotify playlists, they were kind of a thing in 2016, but now entire industries have popped up within that Spotify playlisting ecosystem, so I dig into that. I discussed direct marketing, like using Facebook and Instagram ads to kind of find where your audience is around the world and kind of how to target them and people who you think would be your potential fans and bring them into your world. I really discuss a lot more of artist branding, kind of just how to create your cohesive artist world and aesthetic in your story, and basically how to communicate your story to an audience. And that's the thing that I noticed that caught most people up initially was, from first edition, I would receive Instagram DMs from people reading the book, and a lot of them were saying how much it was helping, which was awesome to hear. And then a lot of people were asking me questions and just saying like, hey, I don't really understand this part, or could you clarify this section? So I kind of kept a running note sheet of everything. Just like as people would ask me questions, I knew that when I sat down to write the second edition, I wanted to kind of cover all of these things and be a little bit more clear. So for instance, like artist branding, basically like how to tell your story and communicate who you are as an artist to the general public. That was something that caught up a lot of people. And so I really went deep in on that and kind of gave people tools on how you can tell your story, work a cohesive aesthetic, and just really connect it in an authentic way with an audience. And that's can be challenging for people. And then I went much more global with the second edition. So the first edition was very US centric, and the second edition is much more global. So I talk about how you can collect your royalties from all over the world, no matter where you are, and then all the different kinds of royalties and how to get them. Yeah.
Great. So in the book, you talk about a 50-50 rule, which is about also time and money. So let's talk about that, and also like the bigger picture of like why can't we as musicians just focus on the art? And if the art's good enough, isn't that good enough? Like, won't the art speak for itself? And why do we even need to worry about like emails and marketing and all this headache stuff? Why can't I just sit in my room and just jam out all day?
I know, and believe me, like as a musician, as an artist, I wish that we could just do the art, because that's the fun stuff, and not have to worry about anything else. The reality is that if you want to have a business and you want to turn this into a career, you have to focus on the business. You have to spend time on the business. You have to spend money investing in your business. Because if you don't, you're not going to have a business. You're not going to have a career. And yes, the music is fundamental. That's foundational. That's the baseline. It has to be that's initially has to be the number one focus, and you have to be great.
The product has to be good.
Exactly. Yes, the product has to be good, and that's what we call like product market fit in the marketing world, which just means is there a product, the music, and is it going to fit with a market, your fans, your audience, and is it good enough? And so, what the 50-50 rule, what that means, and kind of it's once you decide to start your music career, meaning. After the incubation stage, after you shed it out in your bedroom, thousands of hours, and you're like, you know what, I'm ready to kind of turn this into a profession, into a career. Once you make that decision, that's when the 50-50 rule kicks into play. And what the 50-50 rule is that 50% of your time should be spent on the art, the creation of the music, the fun stuff. And then 50% of your time needs to be spent on the business, needs to be spent on promotion and marketing and just managing the career and working your social media angle and all of that stuff, booking your shows, anything that deals with the business. And this isn't like a daily thing. This isn't like, 1 o'clock and the alarm goes off and you're like, oh, it's time to switch to the business. That's not really feasible. I can't flip artist brain, business brain on and off like that in the same day. But this is kind of over the course of your career. So, when you're working on your new album or something like that, you're going to be spending 85% of your time in studio, writing, recording, working on that, and maybe 15% on the business, doing some emailing, social media stuff, whatever. And that's totally cool. And so for the duration that you're in studio, absolutely, that time is mostly art. But then when it comes time to release that record, now it's going to flip. Now it's going to be 85% of your time is going to be spent on the promotion of this art, this album, and mostly on the business side of things. And then maybe you'll still have some time to do the art and work that angle. So I think what catches up a lot of artists is they spend 95% of their time just on the creation of that music, and they only spend 5% of the time on the business. And then they wonder why nothing's catching or why they can't build a fan base. And then yes, the 50-50 rule also has to deal with money. And so it's not just your time, but 50% of your money should be invested in the creation of that art. So, buying gear, going into studio, hiring producers, recording engineers, and then 50% of your money should be invested in the promotion of that art, the marketing, the promotion, and all of that.
Great.
Yeah.
So, don't just play guitar all day. Well, it sounds like do play guitar all day and get good at it.
Yes.
and then think about this stuff. And so what is the point at which you should start applying the stuff in your book? Like, when do you know that you're good enough to, first of all, put music out there and to start learning about this other side of music?
Right, and that's a really great question and great point to bring up, is that, during the early stages, when you're still learning and figuring things out and you're becoming great, you do want to hone your craft, and you want to become the best you can be at whatever your focus is, whether it's songwriting or guitar or singing or anything like that. It's kind of like, you'll be dipping your toes in the water as you go through. So you might be playing shows locally, coffee shops or bars or venues or little things here and there, and you'll eventually start to see a shift in your audience. It'll turn from friends and family kind of going there to your shows to support you and giving you supportive hugs afterwards. There'll be a shift where they'll come up to you after the show and they'll have this look of disbelief in their eyes. They're like, that was good. That was really good. And you're like, oh, thanks. They're like, no, you're not listening to me. That was really, really good. And so you start to see oh, and then you'll start to notice that more people are in the crowd that you don't recognize than you do. And similarly, if you're building it online, so I know a lot of the pickup community builds it on Instagram, and you'll start to notice the comments shifting from just oh, that was sweet, or play this song, or learn this song, or whatever, to actually really supporting what you're doing and admiring what you're doing and being inspired by what you're bringing. And so you'll kind of, it's a gut thing, and you'll have to just kind of know in your gut when you feel confident that you are ready to make that jump and to turn this into a career. There are tools out there that can help with this. I encourage market research for all artists to know if their music is ready and competitive at that level, especially this is primarily for recordings. There's a few different market research platforms you can use, there's crowd reviews, Reverb Nation runs that, TuneCore has their own one, and a few different platforms have different things where basically you put a song out there, you pay $100, and you get maybe 200 or 300 average listeners who are fans of this kind of music, who will listen to the song. It's like a survey. They'll listen to the song and they rate it on a bunch of different categories. And they're not musicians necessarily. They're just average listeners. But there's tens of thousands of people that are taking these surveys with thousands of different artists and songs, and so you kind of see where your music stacks up with the general population amongst other people and other songs. So you can kind of see okay, and that's one that's one metric you can use to see okay, are my songs kind of competitive with the other songs in this genre to a general listening audience? And then you can go on the other extreme of that and target music industry professionals, and there's tools like Fluence where you can basically pay a manager or an agent or a radio DJ or a podcaster or a playlister, a couple bucks. Be like, hey, will you listen to this song and let me know your thoughts? And then they listen to the song, they're like, okay, here's my thoughts. And so you're basically paying for their time to give you feedback, and so that can be also helpful too to get some of those trained ears as well.
So a common question that we get is, should I go to college to study music? So I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on this, because I know colleges actually use your book.
Yes.
And you went to college yourself. I spent many years in college. My undergraduate and master's in jazz performance, which isn't the most useful degree.
Sure.
Learning how to play like the 1950 jazz guitarist. But anyway, I would be interested to hear, who do you recommend a college for music, and should someone take out debt to study music in college?
Great question. So yes, a lot of the music universities, especially in the States, but starting to be around the world, have adopted my book, and they're teaching it, and which I very much appreciate, and I think that's amazing. Now, I don't have a bachelor's degree. I went to school just for a couple of years. I got just kind of an associate's program in music business, and I honestly just went to school to learn. I knew that a degree wasn't going to help my music career necessarily. So I think the best part about going to a traditional university where there's a physical campus and a physical community, it's honestly for the community aspect and the networking You meet some really great people there. People that go to the same schools, they find each other. So here in LA, there's a lot of people from USC. Moonchild met at USC. Berklee College of Music is another kind of incubator where they have just a lot of bands form out of school there. And a lot of schools all over the country, bands will form there. So that's a really great kind of benefit to going to a traditional music school. However, is it worth $250,000 to do that? I don't know, and that's going to be kind of a if you're just going for the education, there are now resources that you can use like online education. So I started Ari's Take Academy to teach very specific tactics and goals and classes for very specific working professionals on what they're looking for. So we have like a course on booking and touring and direct marketing and college entertainment and stuff like that. What you're doing with the pickup community, that educational subscription series, I think is brilliant because it's like, we don't necessarily need the traditional learning environment of a brick and mortar university to just kind of get that information and the education. And so we're starting to see more and more organizations, companies, people like Pickup and Ari's Take Academy and so many others that are teaching working professionals, musicians, how to achieve their goals in different ways at a tiny fraction of what the major universities charge, that are actually, what I find oftentimes, more effective. And honestly, oftentimes it can be that they're more useful because they're taught by people like working in the industry right now in real time. And so a lot of times that I find with universities, sometimes their teachers, their professors are 30 years out of the game. And so they're not really connected. They don't really have a pulse on what's happening. And so I love that you bring in guitarists, you bring in musicians who are working, who are gigging, who are being hired. They're freelance players. They're, they've masters on their instrument. They're in it right now, And same with the kind of what we're doing with ATA, people that are kind of working in it right now. And like I've spoken to universities around the world, and I've sat in on music business classes, and like I kid you not. So this was 2 years ago. I was at a school that I'm not going to mention the name, but we've all heard of the school. And I was sitting in on a social media class, and this is now 2017. And I would sit back for like 20 minutes, and on the board they had a projector, and all the social icons and the professor, he was like a 63-year-old dude who like played Trump with James Brown back in the day or something like that. And he's teaching social media. And I kid you not, the biggest social icon in the center of the screen that he was spending the most amount of time talking about in 2017 was MySpace. Oh, yeah. And I'm sitting back here like, no, wait. And all the kids are like, oh, they're taking notes. I'm like, no, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Like, don't be focusing on MySpace right now. Like, that was insane to me. I'm like, this guy, but to him, he was just like, well, even though we know that MySpace virtually died like 8 years ago, he didn't know that. And I'm like, I can't believe that this guy is employed teaching social media to students when he's so far out of reality of what's actually happening in the industry. And so I started to see that more and more at schools. I'm like, well, some schools are killing it and have amazing programs and doing a really great job, and others are kind of behind and need to catch up a little bit. So, it's definitely a personal decision if you feel you learn better in an environment, a more traditional brick and mortar environment, or you learn online through, just various education mediums and models like what you're doing to pick up and everything else. So,
yeah, I agree that the biggest thing a college offers is the community and meeting other musicians.
Yeah.
So then, like you said, the question is that worth the debt? And what are other ways, if you can't afford it, to meet other people? And I actually think Instagram is a great way to like form community and to meet people, especially right now where it's quite like a dominant place for musicians. I don't know if it'll always be, but
right.
I've seen like connections made between people all over the world, like different styles of music across age groups, across genres, who are meeting each other and then meeting up in real life and working together, making music together, people from London, LA, and that type of thing. So
yeah.
I think there are ways to to build community, but nothing is as easy as being shoved into a dorm room or in a classroom together to force friendships that last forever.
Totally. I mean, that's how Coldplay met, in the dorms. They did that, and a lot of bands meet in the dorms and just kind of form that way. And so that's beautiful and wonderful, but is it worth a $200,000 investment? That's kind of, because then you're paying off student loans for the rest of your life, and a lot of, most musicians don't reach Coldplay levels of success, and they just kind of need to figure out how they're going to make an actual working career happen, and those student loans can be quite crushing, and so
Cool. So let's talk about social media. Like,
Sure.
what are the platforms right now? Let's say someone has a song or an album or an EP that they're working on, and they want to release it in the next 6 months or something.
Yep.
Like, what should they do now to start building some buzz around it, and maybe like walk through like the timeline that you advise artists to follow?
So I think step number one, once you have the kind of you have this plan of when you want to release your album and everything, step number one is actually to think about who your target demographic is. Who is your target audience and your fan base? Because everyone has different styles of music. They're going to target different communities and different people. And so I encourage everyone to kind of make an Our Fans list. And you write down everything who you think your fans are. So, our fans are between the ages of 18 and 27. They are they hang out in local coffee shops. They attend these kinds of concerts. They're sports fans. They listen to these podcasts. They watch these kinds of TV shows. You really break it down. They wear these kinds of clothes. They shop vintage shops or whatever. You really break it down very specifically of who you think, this kind of archetype of who your fan is. And of course, it's like a Venn diagram of all different kinds of people, and it's not going to be just one. But if you can identify, for instance, let's use the pickup community, and let's use like Corey Henry, because I thought the campaign that you guys did together was brilliant. It's like, okay, if you're thinking about like, all right, Corey Henry, brilliant keyboard player. I saw you just posted that little duet that he did with Jacob Collier, which is awesome. It's like, all right, so Corey Henry, his audience, as one of the greatest living keyboard players out there right now, his audience, a lot of musicians are into what he's doing. He's got this musical prowess, funk lovers, soul lovers, R&B lovers. So you kind of get this down, and that's just kind of the genre part of it. And so once you identify who your audience is, I thought they did a really great job. It's like, well, actually a lot of Corey Henry's fans are in the pickup community. And so it's like, oh, well, this would actually be a really good partnership to kind of team up together and work together on promoting the new single. And like you did with the Trade It All campaign, where people, you muted his solo and people could make their own solo and then tag him on Instagram. And I thought that was a brilliant campaign because it really identified who his audience was to a T. And part of his audience are musicians, jazz lovers, and since he's a great jazz player, that was a really great partnership and collaboration. And so you want to look at that, and for instance, like the communities that you can target. And so let's say you're in the LGBTQ community. There's all these different organizations and platforms, and on social media, you can find these orgs that you can link up with and create a partnership. Because even if it's not necessarily just targeting fans of the kind of music you make, it's important to look at the communities that you're a part of as well, because community members like helping community members, and people in these worlds kind of like helping each other. There's this synthwave artist named FM84, and based out of San Francisco. And when his debut album came out, he skyrocketed. He reached #1 on 3 Bandcamp charts, and he made it the Spotify Viral 50, and got a few 100,000 streams within the first couple weeks of his release. How did he do this? He found a private Facebook group that was just 80s synthwave music lovers, and he was basically an active member of this community, and not pushing his music by any means. He had no music to push, but He was an active member of this community, and he was basically just communicate with everybody else and hanging out. And he's also a graphic design artist. So when in advance of his album, he would like put some images up. He's like, hey, I'm deciding between the album cover. What do you guys think? And so they'd vote on it. Like, oh, this is cool. I like this one. So when his album did come out, the Facebook group only had about 20,000 members, but they were so engaged and they were so active, and they knew him as kind of their peer. They were like in this community together that they all, when his album came out, they all went to Bandcamp and bought it, and then they went to Spotify and streamed it. There were some Spotify editorial curators in there, playlist editors, in that synthwave group. Were like, oh yeah, this is great. Popped it into the playlists. So this is all being a way to say, once you identify your communities and who they are, and who your potential fans are, then you can start to identify where do they exist online. And so it's not something as simple as just like, oh, here's a hashtag you can use or whatever, like that's how you can find your audience. No, you want to get like really creative and deep into it, as in like, where do they exist? And so maybe they're on Facebook, maybe they're Facebook groups, private groups that the communities exist in there. There's like an extremely active Facebook group for Wolfpack fan club called the Wolf Pack, and there's that's a very active group. So if you're into funk, soul, R&B kind of music, and you're kind of like nerding out in the music world, the Wolf Pack is a place that you can kind of be a part of and hang out in. But there's communities. Maybe it's on Instagram, maybe it's on Twitter. Maybe you want to, if you're targeting a younger audience, maybe head over to TikTok and see if you can like find a community there. So it's really about identifying who your audience is, where do they exist online, and then creative ways to target them.
And so you're saying be involved in those communities and create content ahead of when the music comes out?
Sure. So it's communities like supporting their community members. And so you want to be an active member of a community before you start promoting yourself. And so if all the success stories that we see online oftentimes are people who are active members of these communities. I mean, you actually said in your talk that you did, I think it was like a year ago or something like that, where you're talking about Elise True and how she was very active in her community and was on Instagram. She was responding to messages and people were commenting and people were responding. And so and she was kind of interacting with other people around Instagram. And it's like she was being an active member of that community. Yeah. And by showing that you're supportive and you're active, people are going to naturally gravitate towards that. And then it's more of an authentic relationship that you're building versus like, listen to my music, buy my stuff, come to my thing, buy a ticket. And that feels like kind of intense. And it's just like, well, it's a give and take. And you want to give more than you take.
So, yes, I've seen these artists, even if they have 300, 1,000 followers, if they have 20 super engaged fans,
yes.
And I've seen them support that artist and amplify their music. And I've seen that translate for Cisco Swank. He's a Francisco. Okay. He's a great producer out of Boston who won our last Emerging Artist Fund, and his fans were like super intense. And I was like, wow, I need to pay attention to this guy.
Yeah.
I also noticed it with a few winners, but yeah. And people like Elise Chow early on, I remember her. She would do a lot of collaborations with people, make like combo videos on Instagram. Also, there's a young artist called Jude Smith out of Nashville who's just skyrocketed on Instagram, and now he's touring around, and he's done it through collaboration videos with awesome artists. So being engaged is the right approach, and I think that's something that everyone can start right away, even if the album or song is a few months away.
And you make a really good point of that you don't need millions of fans to build a career. Even if you just have like 1,000 really die-hard supporters, that's the 1,000 true fans concept. You get 1,000 people to pay you $100 a year. That's a $100,000 annual salary. You're living fine. That's a great living. Because in the way that you get these people to connect with you is that authentic connection in the response and interaction, and then they will become super fans of you. And then if you offer ways to support you, whether it's like a crowdfunding campaign you want to do, whether it's a Patreon, or you're going on tour and buying tickets, or merch packages, or Bandcamp subscription, or whatever it is, if you have this fan base, as soon as you offer them ways to support you in terms of like financially support you, they'll do it. And they now trust you and they love you, and so they will definitely come in and kind of support you in the ways that you're asking them to support you, and you don't need millions. And so I think a lot of us, especially on Instagram and especially in the social media world, get caught up with our vanity metrics, with the numbers, and it becomes a numbers game. It's like, ugh, like I only have 5,000 Instagram followers. Like, man, nobody cares about me. And like, I've seen people with 100,000 Instagram followers with day jobs. And so it's kind of like, what are the metrics that you're really caring about and really worrying about? And it's like, we become so obsessed with the vanity metrics of like, how many Instagram followers do you have? How many Spotify monthly listeners do you have? How many YouTube views are you getting? All of that stuff, when those numbers don't matter. What matters is the true connection that you have with your audience. I would much rather have 100 true fans that are deeply connected to me than 10,000 people who are just like passive listeners, who are just kind of like, well, I like that one song in this one Spotify playlist that I listen to sometimes. I don't actually know the artist, but like, yeah, I dig this song. It's like, yeah, you can't build a career off of that. Yeah. You can build a career off of 100 really engaged, passionate supporters.
Yeah, I like it. So you're like talking about bigger, a broader approach to music, which is make good music, build a community, and then the tactics like the hashtags and the techniques, that stuff comes and goes, like the platforms come and go, but if you focus on those fundamentals, then that's how you're going to have like a long career, right?
Right, and I think it's really important for everybody to identify what your goals are from the beginning and really understand, what are you actually working towards? Like when I ask people, it's like, what are your goals? What are you working towards? And it's like, oh, I want 50,000 Instagram followers. I'm like, why? Why do you want 50,000 Instagram followers? It's like, oh, well, because then, I can sell more tickets to my shows because I'm going to be more popular and people are going to want to buy tickets to my shows. I'm like, okay, so your actual goal is that you want to sell out this venue and you want to build a connection with your audience. That has nothing to do with the number of Instagram followers you have. So if your goal is to sell out this venue, make that a goal. And then sure, Instagram may be a part of that promotional strategy for that venue, for working at that venue, but the goal, you really want to get to the root of what your actual goals are. And I think we get caught up in the numbers game, and we don't really understand what we're actually in music for, and that is to build a connection with an audience, release music that we are proud of and that we care about and we're passionate about, and we can connect with an audience who equally is connecting to the music.
Great. So, it is about the bigger, making good music, connecting with people, but let's talk about like a few kind of specific tactics and maybe start with things which you have noticed are on the uprise, whether that's like playlisting or a new social platform. What are things which you think everyone should jump on right now?
Sure. So, for a while, the last 2 years or so, 3 years, the entire industry has been obsessed with Spotify playlists. Yeah. It's kind of like, oh, I need to get onto a Spotify playlist, and like, this is how we're going to succeed. And it's like, there is truth to the sense that if you get on some hot Spotify playlists, your streams will increase virtually overnight, and that is the quickest way to get a bunch of streams in a very short amount of time and from a bunch of listeners. However, that's not really sustainable at building a fan base. And so what I've seen now evolving where we're at right now, we're like in a post-playlist reality right now.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, so the most effective way to actually build on Spotify right now is not really through playlists like everybody thinks. We have found that direct marketing, so running Instagram ads, for instance. So like we've been experimenting for the last 8 months or so with Instagram story ads. So a year and a half ago, Instagram story ads didn't exist. That wasn't a thing. So it's a very new concept. And what it is spending a very little bit of money, like $5 a day, which is their Facebook, Instagram's like bare minimum, on seeking out where your audience is. So you put the interest of like, this is who we think our audience is. Running a 15-second video, could be you playing in your room or whatever it is, whatever is authentically you and your project that will get people to connect with you. It's going to be different for every artist. And then asking them to swipe up and going to Spotify from there. Now, we have found that that has been so effective that there's been artists out there. So, for instance, this artist named Lucidius, he's this hip hop artist. He was out in Virginia for a while. He now lives in LA. He has over 500,000 monthly listeners on Spotify, over 100 million streams, 5 million streams every month. He's making $20,000 a month just from his streaming revenue. He's on 0 playlists, 0 official playlists, no label, no manager, none of that. He built up his entire audience based on these tactics and based on like the Instagram story ad. Initially it was Facebook ads, then it evolved to Instagram story ads. Whatever platform you're using with the ads that you're running, the main thing to remember is it's all part of digital marketing. It's all part of finding where your audience is and then welcoming them into your world based on kind of like spending a little bit of money on marketing. And so this is so effective right now that we're seeing artists of every genre. Now this is one of the Ari Sek Academy courses that we're running, because now we have like almost 1,000 people that we've been testing this out with, and that it's working for people of every genre, every practice, most demographics, because it's going after the audience directly, not hoping that they're going to, when they hear your song on a playlist, actually like that song enough to like tap through and be like, oh, who is this artist? Then tap through again to the profile, and then like listen to your song to the profile, and then tap through again to get to your Instagram, and then tap through again to see what show, you know, if you're touring, and like get on your email list and all of that stuff. This is going directly to the fan. And so we've done this now with getting them to Spotify, but also getting them to your Instagram profile. And so we've seen, actually, when we run these ads, getting people into your Instagram profile, that not only do your followers increase, the engagement is also increasing. Because now these fans almost feel like they discovered you, because your video popped up into their story feed and like, oh, this is really cool. They swipe up, they go to your profile, they're like, oh, I love this profile. And they start to watch your videos, they see your photos, they follow you, they message you, they interact. And so we've now found that more people are getting more followers, and engagement is going up based on direct marketing, based on just running these ads that are very inexpensive. We're looking at anywhere from like 2 to 5 cents per click is what you know, people can expect to pay for this kind of stuff. And then it just kind of snowballs from there. And then once you start to bring more people into your Spotify profile and you start to get more listeners and streams, it triggers all the algorithms. So then you're getting into people's Discover Weeklies, and you're getting on Release Radar and the radio. And so that's been a way that we've noticed growth on Spotify can really increase in a way that's not just like hoping that I get on a Spotify playlist, because that's like everyone's just like, oh, I just want to get on a playlist. That's the end all be all. I'm like, yeah, it can help a little bit, but I've seen people get on Spotify playlists, big playlists, and they get hundreds of thousands or millions of streams in the first month. And they're like, and they start making a lot of money from this. And so they quit their day job and like, I've made it, this is great. And they're on these playlists for a few months, and like they're rolling in it. And then they get dropped from the playlists, and their streams, they go back down to 0. And now they're not making any money from where they thought before they were like earning maybe $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month from streaming revenue because of these playlists, and now they're earning back to like $100 a month because they got dropped from the playlist. So now they're going to beg for the day job back. I'm like, that's not sustainable. Like playlisting is not a marketing strategy.
So the goal is to get your own followers on Spotify, so you have the monthly listeners,
absolutely,
rather than relying on playlists.
Exactly, because if you build followers on Spotify versus just listeners, if they actually choose and decide to follow you, every time you release a new song, they'll get notified in their release radar. And through various, Spotify's been fairly good at helping inform your audience and your followers of you that you have a new song out. So building followers on Spotify right now is actually a really strong way to keep them engaged as you release new music. And so then you do have to follow it up with new music, because then the release radar happens, and then you trigger the algorithms. But yes, much more so than just playlists and monthly listeners.
Cool. Let's talk briefly about Instagram. So
Sure.
a lot of our audience is on Instagram. We're on Instagram live right now. So hi guys.
Yeah.
So what's happening with Instagram? Has it what is your view, and has it plateaued in terms of growth? Is if you're not big on Instagram now, do you still have the opportunity to build a fan base there?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not Instagram, then where else are people hanging out? Because I guess the bigger picture is it's just attention, where people's attention is, and as a musician, you want to convey your story, so you need to be where the people are and communicating with them within the platform.
Right. So it's first again identifying who your potential fans are and where do they hang out.
Yeah.
So what kind of this beautiful thing about the new music business is that it's so much more fragmented than the old music business. So back in the day, 15 years ago, it was pretty much, you know, the only way that you had a career was you get a song on the radio, you penetrated the whole world all at once, and it was either you were a superstar or you were a starving artist, and there really wasn't much in between. And it was like very little discovery was happening anywhere else other than on the radio. And now, fans can find music in very interesting, unique ways and hang out with their favorite artists in different platforms. So identifying who your audience is and who you're targeting is really paramount, because then you'll figure out, okay, where are they hanging out? So for instance, like, you know, if you're targeting people in older audience, let's say you're a jazz artist, or let's say like a more traditional jazz artist, or let's say you're a folk artist, older fans are hanging out more on Facebook than they are on Instagram. So if you're a folk duo or something like that, spending all of your efforts trying to build it up on Instagram may not be the smartest path right now. You might want to spend more time on Facebook, but flip that around. If you're targeting younger audience, teenagers, 20-somethings, spending all your efforts on Facebook isn't really the smartest course of action right now, because they're more hanging out on Instagram or Snapchat or TikTok. And so it's important to understand who you're targeting and where they exist. But even within the platform, so Instagram, for instance, there are sub-communities that are popping up around, and Pickup being one of these sub-communities. And so whereas like 4 years ago, it was kind of just like Instagram and hashtags, and that was really how it was broken up, now we're starting to see real communities that are forming amongst various profiles, but also amongst topics and different kinds of communities. And so you can go within the Instagram platform and find your audience, like we talked about earlier with Corey Henry and the Pickup community, finding each other there. But there are all these different categories. So it's kind of like once you identify who your fans are, then you can see, okay, where are they hanging out? Are they on Instagram? Okay, where on Instagram? And who are they interacting with? And what kinds of profiles are they interacting with? And how are they interacting? And so then you can kind of look at that. And as Instagram evolves, you want to stay up on ways that you can engage with an audience and find them. So for instance, like when IGTV was launched, we saw people use it in really interesting ways to connect with that audience in Instagram in a way that supports the platform and the medium. Because if people are hanging out on a platform like Instagram, you want to engage with them within the platform in a way that's fun for them, so they can have fun engaging with you on that platform. And so that's why it's really important to create content specific for that platform. So like, for instance, when IGTV first came out, there's this artist, Lauren Ruth Ward, who, she was one of the first that I noticed that did this, created a vertical music video. Like, it was kind of a live from the Echo video. And she used it. It wasn't just like a vertical formatting. She had, it was like the horizontal 16:9 aspect ratio video, but then there were 3 of them stacked on each other, and they would pop in and out, and they were colored differently, and they were from different angles from that performance. And so it was a really cool way that she utilized the medium in this new, this new medium that Instagram launched, in a way that was engaging, was exciting for her audience and for her fans. The 1975 similarly did something with IGTV where they released their music video for one of their new songs. It was a play off of the full original music video that was on YouTube, but then they took one stylistic aspect of that video and made an entire IGTV video specifically for that, because that's how you can then engage your audience on the platform where they exist. And so, yes, if your audience is hanging out on YouTube, create content that's going to engage the YouTube audience. But if they're hanging out on Instagram, then you want to create content that's going to engage them there as well.
Yeah. I've just been getting into TikTok in the past 3 weeks because a guy that I look up to a lot or read about is this guy Gary Vee, who I'm sure you've heard of.
Yep.
And really how I actually started to pick up was applying his principles, which is quite general, how to build your own business through social media and online and like the post like Google AdWords blog era.
Sure.
This was like 2014. So his big push now has been on TikTok. So I've had one viral video so far and it's like crazy. Like I think everyone should like check it out and understand it. And once you get past like the silly nature of it,
right,
it's kind of fun.
I mean, honestly, that's the next era, I think, is where people are going to be discovering how you can be successful on TikTok. Like up until this point, we haven't had too many tangible success stories of artists actually kind of finding an audience on TikTok in a sustainable way. Right now, there's viral videos happening here and there, but we're going to start to see like, is that sustainable and how do you build an audience that way? So, the next edition of my book will probably be touching on all the success stories that have happened in the coming couple years of what's going to happen. Like 3 years ago, live streaming wasn't really a thing. And now with Instagram Live and Facebook Live, Periscope and YouNow and all these other live streaming platforms, people have actually found their audience there as well. Like I mentioned, there's this artist named Dawn Beyer. She made $100,000 through Facebook Live. Even though you can't monetize on Facebook Live, her audience was there, and she decided to go live every day from her bedroom. And she put a PayPal.me link there for tips, and she went live so consistently, and people like built up such this authentic relationship with her audience that they were tipping her there. And throughout 1 year, she made $100,000 just from going live on Facebook Live. And like Claire Means is an artist she is one of the most successful musicians on Periscope. And she built up her audience on Periscope and makes thousands of dollars a month just from her audience on Periscope. And YouNow, there's this artist named Emma McGann and Brent Morgan. They each make between $10,000 and $20,000 a month just from YouNow going live on there. But now, like, I say all these platforms, and then I know people are listening like, oh, I got to try YouNow, or I got to try Facebook Live, or I got to try Periscope. It's like, well, maybe, but maybe not. Like, there are tactics that every one of these success stories utilize to become successful. And I mean, Gary Vee talks about this. You actually mentioned it in your masterclass last year, as in like consistency is so key. And whatever platform you decide to choose, whether it's going to be TikTok or Instagram or YouNow or Periscope or Facebook Live or whatever, consistency is so paramount. And like Claire Means, who she now is the most successful musician on Periscope, it took her 6 months of going live every single day to reach 1,000 followers. And it's like most artists don't have that discipline to say, oh, I'm going to try this out every day for 6 months and like without much success. But if you decide like TikTok is inspiring for you and it's like, actually, I want to try this out and this is fun for me and I enjoy doing it, then yeah, go for it. But then know that you're going to have to be consistent if you want to really build something sustainable.
Sweet. So let's like get into the end of the chat. Is there any other kind of bits of information or like advice? In my opinion, I think this is like the best time ever to be a musician. There's so many tools. There's so many ways to communicate with your audience. It's very affordable to make great music at home. There's so many like bedroom producers or musicians coming out of their bedroom and not being in main cities like LA or New York. Right. So how do you see like the general landscape of being a musician, like, and how to make a living as a musician or an artist? Yeah, I agree. I think this is the best time to be a musician in the history of the entire music business. There are so many tools at our disposal and so many different kinds of artists that are having careers now that never would have been able to find an audience or have a career before. Because if you think about it, like maybe you make this like really obscure kind of prog, rock, metal, jazz, fusion, hip hop, whatever. And maybe you live in Lincoln, Nebraska. And maybe in Lincoln, Nebraska, nobody in town likes the kind of music you make. And they're like, this is weird, I don't get it, I don't like it. And so before the internet, you'd think, well, my music sucks. It doesn't connect. But let's say there's 50,000 people in the world who love that kind of weird, twisted, fusion-y stuff that you make. Now you can find those 50,000 people, and maybe like
7 of them exist in Birmingham, and 12 of them exist over in Minneapolis, and 3,000 exist in LA, and 12 exist in New Zealand, and 50 exist in Mumbai, India. Now you can find where your audience is that way. So I think it's like a beautiful time, beautiful era, the best time to be an independent musician, or just a musician in general. And so what's so interesting is that, yes, in the old music business, there was really just one way to make a music career happen, and that was you get signed, you get songs on the radio, you go on tour. In the new music business, there are 100 different ways to make a sustainable music career happen for you. And that's exciting and empowering. It's also daunting and intimidating, because it's kind of like with so many choices and options out there, musicians like, but where do I begin? What do I do? Like, what should I pursue? And so the most important thing that every artist can do at any stage of their career, whether they're just getting started or whether they're 20 years into their career, is create a goals sheet. And so you set up, I encourage you to make 6-month, 1-year, and 5-year goals. And so you write down very concrete, specific goals of what you want to do, because artists come to me and they're like, well, what should I do? Like, what should I pursue? And how am I going to be successful? And I first say, like, I have no idea, because I don't know what you want, and I don't know what kind of artist you are, what inspires you, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and what kind of career you want to have. Like, do you want to tour? If not, that's okay, but that's part of the conversation. So it's like, that's why you need to lay out your goals and say, like, all right, a concrete goal is, I want to sell at this venue in 1 year, this like local 500 cap venue or something like that. I want to sell it out in 1 year. It's like, that's a great tangible goal that you can achieve, because then you set the goal and then you reverse engineer it. And it's like, okay, now I want to, now I know that I need to play these shows and I need to sell this many tickets and that kind of stuff. Or another goal would be like, I want to get a song placed on a TV show within a year. It's like, very feasible, tangible goal, but that's a completely different approach to achieve that goal than it is to sell out the venue in town. Maybe another goal is, I want to make $2,000 a month from making music at home, monetized online. Okay, solid, tangible goal. Then you want to go deeper. Is it's like, okay, where are my strengths? Are my strengths in live streaming? Do I like doing this? Is that what I'm inspired by? Yes, okay, I can explore the live streaming platforms. Maybe Twitch is going to be for me. Maybe it's YouNow. Maybe it's Facebook Live. And then you kind of go deeper with that. And so it's really the most important thing that any musician can do is identify what your goals are, what your strengths are, and what your weaknesses are. And then you can decide what kind of career that you want to have and then go all in on that.
Great. And if you want to dive deep into it, then we got the book right here. Is this the second edition or is this the first one?
This is the second edition.
Right.
Yeah, this is, yeah.
Yeah, so it comes out November 5th, right?
It comes out November 5th. You can pre-order right now. So there's a link in my bio, Instagram. You can pre-order the book. And then, this will be in all the bookstores come November 5th. So your local bookstore, Barnes & Noble, or it's on Amazon right now, of course.
And also Ari's blog, aristake.com, that's got a great place. And also your academy, which is where it sounds like you learn about direct marketing.
Yes, that's aristakeacademy.com, direct marketing, booking and touring, and we have some other courses too. So,
Sweet, man. Thanks for the chat. And,
my pleasure.
Yeah.
Cool, thanks. See you guys.